Well, I'd like to introduce our speaker here. Today we're very fortunate to have Tom Baker. Tom is my favorite speaker here at the church. He and I go back many years. Tom was a Catholic minister, Catholic priest, I should say, for 10 years. And he taught homiletics. That's a Catholic term for sermons. Homiletics are, I understand, a little bit shorter than the typical Protestant service. But this man taught in the seminary all the priests to be how to give talks, so he knows how to give a good one himself. When Tom left this Catholic priesthood, he left the biggest church in the world and joined the smallest church in the world, and became ordained in our church. He's an ordained minister with the Fellowship of the Inner Light, and he's been a blessing to us ever since. He's a practicing psychotherapist, and as it would be for years, he was in one office, I was in another, and then the type of karma we have is he ended up in my office, and actually we have 7 offices there, but he's sharing my office with me. So we have some kind of a karmic connection. So Tom, come on up.
Thank you, Bruce.
You're welcome.
Well, let's see. Let's put the mask away. You know, most places you would go to church this morning, you would be considered to be a sinner. A sinner. Something is wrong with you. A stain upon your soul. Sinner. A recrimination written in the book of life. As a sinner, you have offended God. Going to church in most places is like going into a beautiful, still, quiet place where you will be punched in the stomach of your soul right from the beginning. You're a sinner, we all are, get used to it. Except maybe the dog.
Well, he's a sinner.
He's a sinner, right. Knowing yourself as a sinner can be a humbling experience, but it can also be a kind of stunting experience. Jesus died so that you could go to heaven, but even then you're still a sinner. Yet how can you look into the eyes of someone you love and call them a sinner? It just doesn't feel right. They may be mischievous or irresponsible or careless. They may be forgetful or addicted, but a sinner? There is an innocence in people's eyes that is easy to miss when all we notice is their behavior. How they act, we say, is what they are. What you do determines who you are. Now that's a shallow and a rigid way to see a person. It is a rash way to interact with people. It's mistaking the person with a label for that person. Addict, criminal, thief, sinner, the God offender. The gospel means good news, not bad news. The gospel gives us the good news about ourselves. And the good news is that God is not offended with us. The deity is friendly. Want me to stop a minute so you can...
No, you don't stop it by itself.
Okay. The deity is friendly, like Bruce. He forgives us and he sees us. In seeing us, he forgives us. God sees us as innocent, not as sinners, because he knows us down deep to the atoms of our souls. Now you can imagine the problems I had in the Catholic Church. I've talked about the shock I had when I heard my first confession in a confessional. I was a convert to Catholicism, so I had never been to confession in a confessional or a box. I had also never read the Act of Contrition, one line of which says, "Oh my God, I'm most sorry, heartily sorry for having offended you, and I repent of my sins, not because of your just punishments, but because of my love for you." Now, when I first heard this, I was shocked. I thought the person was saying a prayer that they'd made up. So I said to the person, "Sir, you can't offend God. God is bigger and better than that. And besides, God adores you. God sees what's behind your mistakes. He sees the pain and the fear you have way before you do the wrong thing. God understands. He forgives you even before you act." Now, people had lots of reactions to what I said to them about the act of contrition. Sometimes people said it was too good to be true. Happily confused, some people said. Not so happily confused. Some people had questions about my orthodoxy. It is a huge reversal in how we see ourselves. For so long, we have seen ourselves as deep down bad. If you could only read my thoughts, you would think of me as a selfish monster. That's why we want to keep our thoughts to ourselves. What if people could read your thoughts? What would they think of you? Well, they would think of you about the way they thought of themselves, because most of our thoughts are the same. That's what I realized hearing confessions and listening to people's troubles over 25 years as a counselor. The negative I hear in people does not revolve around their evil. It revolves around their fear and their anger. We're afraid we won't be loved. And we're pretty angry when we're not loved, especially in the way we want to be loved. We're sweet, but very particular about what we want and how we want it. In other words, we're lovable, but hard to please. And we are very easily offended. Now that's the God in the act of contrition. Lovable as the creator of butterflies and giraffes, but legalistic about the rules and pretty touchy. The God in the act of contrition is a projection of our ego selves onto God. So, what is God like? My definition of God, or the best definition of God I can think of, is that God is like us, except He does not have a separate self that sees itself as superior or inferior. All of us looks at ourselves and then looks at other people, and we compare ourselves to them. Are we as young? Are we as old? Are we as wise? Are we as stupid? Are we as bright as we are dull, or as we are plain, as we are magnificent? Which am I? Which am I? Which am I? The closest we come to being like God is when we are parents. The mature parent, notice I say mature and not the good parent. The mature parent sees the child as part of them, especially the mother. As the child matures, they constantly explain the child to the mother and to some extent to the father. The child explains themselves to the mother and father. The mother knows the child at its most vulnerable. I'm scared. I'm sick. I'm mad. I hate you. I want to be with you forever. The mature parent sees in the child what God sees, which is innocent. Occasionally a touch of malice, but mostly innocence. When the innocence of the child is cultivated, validated, and encouraged, then the divinity of the child shines out. The child is honest, generous, and trusting. Now, if the child is known only for its behavior, and its behavior is unpleasant, then the child is labeled bad or a sinner. And the child starts believing in its own evil. That's what the Garden of Eden was about, where Adam and Eve eat of the fruit of the tree of good and evil. We start believing that something must be bad in us because we're treated that way. Now, if I think I'm bad, I will tend to act bad. Human beings tend to follow the way they think they are. They play to type. If you're an innocent type, then you will act in ways that reflect innocence. Honest, generous, and trusting, as I said before. If you are a guilty or evil type, you will act in ways that are evil, or, this is most of the time, you will act good, but also act apologetically, defensively, and will not trust yourself. When we as people are criticized, judged, or dismissed over time, we lose hope in our innocence. Our innocence, when it's lost, looks like depression, or in a more healthy reaction, anger at being treated as bad when we know ourselves down deep as innocent. When you really look at yourself and when you really look into the eyes of another person, what you finally see and know is innocence. The more we are distant from those who believe in us, the more evil we think we are. That's why it's so wonderful to be introduced at this church. People say wonderful things about me. And for a moment, I believe them. For a moment, you believe them. The world is wonderful. But what I want to know, does God believe it? Does God really believe in me? And I think He does. At my first Mass, I remember holding up the bread and the wine to consecrate it, and thinking to myself, "Oh Lord, I have such faith in you." And then I heard a thought, a very loud thought in my mind that said, "Oh Tom, you have no faith in me hardly at all. But I have unlimited faith in you." Wasn't that sweet? You know, it's often said these days that the most important thing you can do is love yourself. Love yourself, we say, and you will love others. Well, I don't think that goes deep enough. For one thing, it doesn't work very well. You can stand in front of the mirror and love yourself, and you will only increase your narcissism. You think, I love myself and I'm so much better than they are. So go deep. Go deep and believe in your own innocence and in the innocence of others. That will introduce you to your own and others' fear and pain. I once was talking to a conference of bishops, and I said that when we hear people's confessions, we're actually hearing their loneliness. And you're hearing what's behind that loneliness, which is fear and pain. And you know, all the bishops looked back at me and they nodded. Their big mitre hats going like this, back and forth, as if to say, me too, me too. We're all in this together, but we're not sinners. We're all innocent. And we're all searching to remember within ourselves the innocence God knows us to be. Thank you.